Hello, Dr. Richter here. I just wanted to show you exactly what's important about vitamin D and how that plays into omega-3 and magnesium. And there's a lot of confusion about how much vitamin D to take and what not to take and when to take. So vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, which is very important, meaning that it builds up in your fat system in your body. It's not actually a vitamin. It functions more like a hormone and influences multiple body systems rather than being a cofactor for enzymes, what the normal definition of a vitamin is. It regulates immune function through that, affects mood, cardiovascular health, and there are two main forms, vitamin D2 and D3, namely cholecalciferol, that is labeled on your bottle. So vitamin D is naturally synthesized from your skin, and then it is processed in the liver. However, the final version of vitamin D is actually made in your kidneys. And the reason is that we want to have a storage contingency in our liver, and the active form should only be made when you actually need it and then rapidly degrade it. So that final product in the kidneys, calcitrol, is then floating through your system, and it binds to the vitamin D receptor to regulate calcium and phosphate balance and your immune system. So once again, it's actually mainly made in the liver, but then it is converted to the active form in the kidneys. So a natural vitamin D reaction requires UV light, and your skin needs to be exposed to vitamin D level UVs for an extended amount of time. So there is a minimum of 60 minutes full back exposure. So that's very difficult to get for most people. And the reason is this reaction here is a high energy reaction. It requires high energy UV light to split this bond. And that basically makes then pre-vitamin D, like I said, which is basically stored in your liver and then made into the final form in your kidneys. So this vitamin D intermediate in your liver has a fairly long half-life of 2 to 3 weeks, and that ensures a steady supply. So if you're getting a lot of sun one day and not so much the next day, you can still basically enjoy the effects of your vitamin D. Liver produces, kidney activates. The kidney also ensures the regulatory pathways through the pituitary gland this way. And the kidney also degrades excess vitamin D. This is done in CY proteins that normally are made in the liver. And you don't want to have an overdose of vitamin D. So when your body makes too much, it's actually starting to degrade it. But that rarely happens. So again, here's a nice picture of it. You have cholecalciferol in your diet that comes from cholesterol, actually. So cholesterol is a very important precursor. With the help of vitamin D3 is made on UV, and so then the liver stores that, and the kidney makes the final version of it, 1,2,5-hydroxyl. And what is parathyroid hormone? Basically, it's a peptide that is made in your parathyroid glands, and the primary function is to maintain calcium. So the blood pH is very closely controlled, and it's within a very narrow range of a few points. That means that you need to release calcium from bones to buffer excess acidity, and vice versa. So this constantly needs to happen. And low blood calcium levels then are basically controlled through the parathyroid hormone. So the parathyroid hormone stimulates the final activation of vitamin D in the kidney, and that basically backfeeds from low calcium levels. And it basically is the final hormone that makes that transition in the kidney to 1,2,5-hydroxyl calcitrol, the active form of vitamin D. That calcitrol then goes back and increases calcium absorption from the intestines or from the bones, and basically then backfeeds to the pituitary hormone, and this is called a negative feedback loop. So the system is in constant balance. Vitamin D and pituitary hormone are linked for good bone health, and vitamin D increases calcium absorption, like I said, then stimulates bone resorption, and you don't want to have that happen too much, right? Because then you will dissolve your bones. That's the case in osteoporosis. And reduced calcium loss in the urine via kidney regulation. So without vitamin D, your calcium absorption drops significantly. And that's one of the main reasons that you really need vitamin D. It helps keeping that calcium in your system, and you're not dissolving your bones, and you're not activating your parathyroid hormone. So the key here is that you can't eat really that much calcium anyways, because it causes stones, but you really want to absorb it when you need it and not when you don't need it. So there's an integrated balance here between blood pH, calcium, bone density, pituitary, and vitamin D. So yeah, deficiency then causes muscle weakness and fatigue, because obviously if your bones aren't healthy, your body is backfeeding, and it weakens the muscles and tendon attachments. Immune response gets weakened, and you're actually getting bone pain and increased fracture risk, like I was just mentioning. Osteoporosis is basically also linked to vitamin D deficiency. It has very interesting effect on mood disturbances, and overall chronic diseases, inflammation, and omega-3 deficiency play together in autoimmune diseases. So early symptoms are pretty subtle, and they should never be ignored. So nausea, vomiting, loss of appetite, increased thirst, and fatigue and weakness. So most people live with a very low level of vitamin D, and we know that it's critical for viral infections. It is definitely a trigger for critical COVID infections. So overdosing isn't good either. That's why we need to test. And I will explain to you what an adequate level is, but these values between 20 and 50 have been established because that's what your natural levels are. So when you overdose, meaning more than 4,000 IUs per day, not daily value IUs, that is basically too much. Most people who are taking 10,000 will overdose. And then toxic levels build up in your body and you can't really reduce it fast enough. So long-term overdose is too much calcium in the blood, and then kidney stones and cardiovascular issues. You can literally turn hepatitic yellowish if you overdose on vitamin D. And it stores in the fat tissue throughout your body, but mainly in the liver. Yeah, vitamin D is tested in the blood, and optimal levels, like I showed, are between 30 and 50 nanograms. So there's two scales here. One is nanograms, one is nanomoles, and you have to be a little careful with that. So I will show both of them here in a little bit, but nanograms is not the same as nanomoles. You need to test. So it should be part of a normal blood test. If it's not, we have a test available that's just very inexpensive, can be done at home. So this was my own test. I was taking a minimal supplementation, and I always thought I have lots and lots of sun exposure here in the summer. This was after the summer, but yet I was at the very lower end of the spectrum. So that's why testing is a very important step. So magnesium is necessary to absorb vitamin D. Magnesium is important for 300 enzymatic reactions, specifically the glycolysis, energy production. All of the enzymes involved here in glycolysis require magnesium as a cofactor. So between omega-3, vitamin D, and magnesium, those are your three most critical nutraceuticals. And magnesium plays a critical role in vitamin D metabolism. So yeah, magnesium activates vitamin D in the liver and kidneys. So as I explained earlier, this process requires several steps, and these enzymes require magnesium. Without sufficient magnesium, the vitamin D cannot properly be utilized. So supplementing D without magnesium actually just builds up toxic cholecalciferol. It's not a good idea. Magnesium is required also for pituitary secretion, and low levels of magnesium suppress PTH. So just measuring your magnesium in your blood doesn't help either, because we don't know what it does in the cells, what the levels are. So we now say that, magnesium supplementation is probably the most important thing you have to do. Yeah, our supplement contains a mixture of 4 different magnesium types. You need to cycle through them: hydroxide, citrate, malate, bicarbonate. There's about a dozen different versions of it. It just helps for the body to absorb them. If you just take it in one magnesium supplement, the body will not absorb it properly all the time. And so you mix them together, vitamin D and magnesium, and that's when you have the best absorption qualities of your supplement. Don't take any gel caps. They are most likely rancid. Same for omega-3. There's just too much surface, too much oxidation potential. And that's why we take D3 in a cholecalciferol pill form, not in a liquid gel caps. D2 doesn't really work as well, has a shorter half-life, so we really just want D3. And D2 is also metabolized completely differently. Bottom line is nobody's taking D2, we're all taking D3. Just making sure you're taking the right supplement. So how do we know what good levels are? And here we come to the two scales. So lifeguards are probably the most exposed profession. They spend, sun exposure all day long, mostly without any shirts on. And they max out at about 175 nanomoles or 60 nanograms. After that, your body just will stop making it, or in other words, it will degrade it right away. We also know that from natural hunters and gatherers tribes. Indigenous tribes have these high levels because they're continuously exposed to sun, which a normal Western human isn't. We spend most of our time indoors. And again, this takes hours and hours of direct sun exposure to the skin. I again tested myself. I get a lot of sun in the summer and it was not nearly enough. Yeah, so here's the conversion. 2.5 is the conversion from nanomoles to nanograms. So just make sure you're looking at the correct scale here when you're getting your test in. The vitamin D receptor is nuclear receptor, meaning it's in the nucleus of the cells. And so that's basically controlling gene expression. And that's where the fat-soluble vitamin D calcitrol is basically accessing inside the cells. It's involved in reducing inflammation and autoimmunity. And I already talked extensively about calcium and how it gets dissolved out of your bones and how you can absorb 3 times more with vitamin D from your intestines. So yeah, the summary, vitamin D is a steroid hormone, not a vitamin. It is a nutraceutical, nutrition pharmaceutical, because nobody can make enough on their own anymore, which basically means it's essential. Nothing in your calcium metabolism or bone pituitary metabolism and your immunity really works properly without vitamin D. And one of the things I talk about in my autoimmune talk is that it helps reduce chronic inflammation together with omega-3. So omega-3 supports the vitamin D receptor activation. It enhances the vitamin D effect. So once you are pre-primed on omega-3, meaning you have over 8%, which takes typically 1.5 years, 2 years on a non-rancid supplement, you will definitely have a much higher effect of vitamin D. It enhances its effect. And the resolvents and protectants from omega-3 help together with the vitamin D on reducing chronic inflammation, reducing autoimmunity, immune balance, and infection risk. So when you need vitamin K, really only if you take more than 2,000 to 4,000 IUs a day. I don't typically take any K. It's in green leafy vegetables. But by all means, when you are taking more than 2,000, which you should, you need to think about vitamin K. Typically, people really need it over 4,000 IUs. And the IUs versus daily value is a big issue here. So daily value is totally underrated. So when it says 600 to 800 IUs, that will not even get you to 10 nanograms. You really need 2,000 IUs for an average American 60, 70, 80 kilogram human, and better 4,000 to really get to optimal health ratios. And some people go up to 10,000. I again disagree. and you need to get tested. So when you take that much, you definitely want to make sure you're not overdosing. So yeah, 4,000 is optimal for an average person, in my opinion. Um, but by all means, it's dependent on your body mass index and your weight, of course. So 4,000 is 100 micrograms. So you need to look at your actual pills and how much they really contain, just to make sure that, and 1,000 IUs are equivalent to 12 to 25 micrograms of cholecalciferol. So yeah, again, we recommend our Xenoshine combination, vitamin D, 4 types of magnesium, together with the test. That's the best value. If your doctor is not testing for vitamin D, this is a great home test. Or if you want a second test during the year, it's very affordable. And that's all I have to say about vitamin D. And please check with my other talks on heart disease and autoimmunity.